Hey guys, what's going on? It's Tyson. This is part 1 of how to transform your stock Promaster, and in this video we're installing a 1.5 inch front leveling kit on your Ram Promaster. This should be good for Promasters 2013 to years 2020. At the time of filming, there were only 2 companies that offered leveling kits for the Promaster. We ended up going with the cheapest option, the Tema 4x4. You can get it on eBay and Amazon, and we'll link it down below. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is remove the negative battery terminal from the battery. Once you do that, we're going to start on the driver's side vehicle. You're going to locate the 3 Phillips head screws securing the steering column cover. With those 3 screws removed, you can pull that cover plate away from the dash and separate the clips securing the dash panel. After the steering column cover has been removed, disconnect the electrical connections on the front of the BCM, the body control module. There are 4 large connectors and 1 small main connector which needs to be removed. Note, the electrical connectors on the BCM can only be reinstalled in the port that they were removed from. There's no need to label the location they came out of the BCM. Once you remove all the connectors from the BCM, remove the 3 nuts/bolts securing the BCM to the dash using a 10mm socket. Pull the BCM away from the dash. Now we can move over to the passenger side. Above the passenger side glove box, remove those 3 screws. Next, we locate the 2 tabs on each side of the glove box, which limits the glove box's open position. Pry these 2 tabs inward and allow the glove box to fully rotate down. With the glove box flipped down, locate the 2 T25 Torx screws. Now we can pull the glove box mounting panel away from the dash and free it from its clips. Next up, using a 21mm socket, break the lug nuts loose. Alright, so once you get the wheel off, and to give you kind of an overall idea of what's going on, is we need to pull down this strut. We need to take it out and then put the spacer in between that and the top of the strut. So to get this off, you have to take off the rotor, the caliper, you have to take off lower ball joint, sway bar link, tie rod end, couple sensors. You have to push the axle through this main strut assembly. So kind of the idea is, first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna unhook the speed sensor, you're gonna unhook the brake caliper sensors, then we're gonna take the brake caliper off, and these are 2 really big bolts back here. When we get to that point, we'll show you how to do that. Alright, the next thing you're going to need to do is remove the wheel speed sensor. You remove this with a 5mm Allen, and you pull the wheel speed sensor from the steering knuckle. Next up, you're going to want to pry this small little clip that's keeping the brake line in place. Once you remove this clip, you can pop out the brake line. Next, you're going to want to remove the tie rod end from the steering knuckle. Use a 22mm socket to remove the tie rod end nut. To break the tapered end of the tie rod loose from the steering knuckle, use a 5-pound sledgehammer. Next, locate the brake caliper Allen bolts. Use a 14mm Allen socket to remove these brake caliper bolts. We used a big breaker bar to make this part easier. Next, using a 12mm socket, remove the wheel alignment pin securing the brake rotor to the hub. Remove the brake rotor from the hub. Next, remove the brake caliper dust shield. Next, remove the nut at the lower strut bolt which secures the strut to the steering knuckle. Use a 12.6mm socket for the bolt head or an inverted Torx socket. Use a 21mm socket for the nut and leave the bolt in the strut/steering knuckle at this time. Remove the lower ball joint nut using a 21mm socket. Again, use a small sledgehammer as before to separate the knuckle from the control arm. Remove the sway bar link from the lower control arm. Use a 12mm socket to remove the nut and the lower half of the pancake bushing. Pry the stake tabs on the axle nut so that they clear the groove in the axle shaft. Once the indents are clear, the notches in the axle shaft, remove the axle nut using a 46mm or a 1 13/16 socket. Hey guys, it's Tyson. I wanted to have a quick intermission and talk about crowbars. This was a challenging section of the Promaster lift kit install. We kept bending crowbars, so this is just a D-wall crowbar we got from Home Depot. I think it was $40, and it just straight up bent. Is what we're trying to do is unseat the lower ball joint and pull that ball joint out of the control arm. So we went to Harbor Freight, Home Depot. We just straight up were bending these crowbars. And the reason is our van's brand new, and so the bushings are really tight. So we had to get a tempered crowbar. We got this from a place called Granger. I think it was $60, but this is a really stout crowbar that doesn't bend. And we really had to get some leverage. So we had this, I think it's a 36-inch tempered crowbar plus this pipe. Especially once you add the spacer up top, it makes it even more difficult. So you're gonna need something like this for sure if your van is newer. If not, if you have 100+ miles on your van, you could maybe get away with one of those cheaper crowbars. Yeah, just thought I'd talk about crowbars. At this time, have a helper come lend a hand for the steering knuckle removal. With the lower ball joint nut removed and the lower ball joint unseated from the tapered hole in the control arm, use a long pry bar through the large hole in the lower control arm to pull the control arm down so the steering knuckle can be removed from the lower arm. Have a helper operate the pry bar tool to hold the lower control arm down and pull the steering knuckle up and out of the ball joint hole. Since the strut bolt is still in place, the knuckle will be supported from falling out completely. Now remove the bolt holding the strut assembly in place and remove the strut assembly. Next, remove the 3 16mm bolts holding the strut in place. Have a helper support and remove the strut while the bolts are removed from inside the vehicle. Next, add the spacer to the top of the strut and grab your hardwire. First, install the split washer or the lock washer and then the flat washer. Next, have a helper hold the strut and raise it into place as you bolt it down from inside the vehicle. Then torque down the strut bolts to 41 foot-pounds. Now we reassemble everything. Make sure to torque everything to spec using the guide found in the description down below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask below, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, so we got the lift kit on this Promaster and we got the new BFG K02s. And these are the 245 75/16, so they're a little bit bigger than stock, and then they are the all-terrain. So these fit fine on Promasters on the front. There's no rubbing the front section and rear section, but the back, if we come back here, so this rear section here is fine, but it's up here where it gets kind of tight. Is what we're gonna do. We're gonna come in here and we're gonna cut the fender and we're gonna trim this plastic fender so that the rear tire doesn't rub. So this is a side that we did trim, so gives you about another extra inch of space. We actually trimmed the plastic fender, but on the other side, I think a better way to do it is we can just heat it up and remold it, and then obviously sand this down, paint it so it doesn't rust. These are a lot better in the dirt than the stock tires. Alright, so we got the wheel off. There's just two little fasteners, one here, one underneath. And you can kind of pull this out. It'd be good to have a little friend, amigo. Hold this out, and then you can get in here with the grinder, and we're gonna cut just right here along this line, right to there, and then just finish it off like that. Alright, so we got this side cut up. I think we did a better job on this side than the other side. So essentially, if you remember, we just cut that piece out, and you can see the plastic fender kind of shows where the metal came out. So we kind of cut that piece out. So now we could cut this if we wanted to. I'm gonna try to heat it up and mold it up, see if that works. If not, I'll just cut it off. All right guys, I tried heating it up and reforming it. I ended up melting it. I know if you were more patient, you probably could. I ended up just cutting it off. So this is kind of the finished product. I think we'll throw another coat of paint on there just so it doesn't rust. Throw the wheel back on and we're good to go.